Okay, we're doing it. I don't care what the haters say. I don't care how much people tell you it can't happen or how controversial this player is. We are finally going to cover Gerrid Doaks. Yeah, I know who, right? No, it's just everyone's got to be against someone else. Like, not everyone hates the player I like. Do I even like Doaks? It's fine. I keep getting asked about him though, and since I recently just did a market share college prospects CFB whatever database it is, it's linked in the description, update where I included all the undrafted free agents that I've been collecting. Collecting sounds like I'm putting them in a box, like some kind of weirdo in a basement. Fitting. No, I've been writing them up and keeping track of the undrafted free agent signings, and I don't want to write my next article on undrafted free agents right now, so we're doing this. I've been asked about him several times on Patreon, a few times on Twitter, and that's probably the full sum total of people that are actually interested in Doaks. But the 7th round running back going to Miami Dolphins. All right, let's talk about him. That's the video. Procrastination from writing is the subtext. Yeah, Gerrid Doaks played for Cincinnati in the American East. Who doesn't? Who hasn't? Talked about him at this point. No, he's got a 4-year history, but he actually skipped one of those years because of injury. I believe it was a hernia season in the off season, according to NFL.com. He also missed I think in his last year, when he was actually toting the largest workload he would ever tote for Cincinnati in the American East Conference. He missed a bowl game or something as well because of another injury, and so there are some overtones of injury. But I'm not a doctor, and I certainly don't think hernias reoccur once they're dealt with, so just something to know. Overall view of the profile, I guess we'll do the whole trying to do a beginning, middle, and end thing. And this, I guess, would be the middle, since I did an introduction. I know. Yeah, this is middle. Overview in the middle, that makes sense. Look, literally one player's had a top 12 season at the running back position from anyone drafted in the 7th round, and that was Peyton Hillis, who you probably didn't care about the year that he did that, and I didn't know he did that, and honestly, the only reason I know is because when I was looking up Gerrid Doaks, it turned up, and I was like, that's a thing. So it's not pretty common. My typical stance, and I know that's kind of very hypocritical on a guy who continually pines of the value of undrafted free agents, and even to the extent that I group anyone drafted after the 3rd round. You get all the hits, we'll take the rest into the undrafted free agent category when necessary, especially at wide receiver. But I do tend to think the NFL draft after the 3rd round, there is pretty good signal in the 4th round that teams are taking shots on good receivers that fall pretty much for ridiculous reasons, like, hey, Stephon Diggs is skinny and T.Y. Hilton is short, that kind of stuff. Michael Gallup is good, but we don't like being good, I guess. Anyway, teams are essentially, I think, from my reading of a history of draft, they've got other focuses than we have, especially with their draft. They've got to fill out a lot of positions. Some are special teams, some are role players, some are, let's see if this guy is as good as we think he could be. There are some speculative picks in there, but ultimately I think from round 4 to 7, especially as we get closer to round 7, teams aren't thinking I'm taking my random, deep prospect loves. They're like, we need a gunner, we need someone to block, we need a fullback, we really need a backup 3rd replacement baseman. I know all the positions. That's the way of the mission. I know all the positions, but you get my point, right? They're not thinking, running back who could take over the backfield. I actually think that's why we get a lot of undrafted free agent signal from all positions. Because that's where they're taking their deeper shots. It's like after the draft, they'll sign a few players, put them on the team, see if they can earn a roster spot. In the draft, they're more thinking, hey, we actually scouted this guy. And we know he can at least do this for us in camp. We think he could perform well on the hands team, on the blocking team, on kick or punt returns, and so on and so forth. So that's not positive for Gerrid Doaks. But he is going to Miami, which doesn't have a particularly strong running back depth chart, and he has draft capital, which everyone just defaults to, and it is fair too. Now, I can't yet find a place for him in my top 4 rounds of my rookie board, and I haven't quite finalized those ranks yet, because have I mentioned the procrastination thing? Yeah, I'm doing that lately, apparently. But here's the thing, you should probably be more willing to take shots on running back, just in general, than I can ever find it in my heart to rank. And Gerrid Doaks is a fairly decently sized running back with 7th round draft capital, which is essentially a bad thing, but still, whatever, he was drafted. Well sized, taken by the Miami Dolphins, and injuries happen, and running back turnover happens, and what the hell, maybe he's the next James, he's not, no one's the next James Robinson, like at all, but still. He's worth knowing about, and I honestly think he's as decent of a just grab a running back to stash on your bench, because that's where we should really be speculating more heavily than my heart will typically let me rank. And he fits in with that mall of running backs. I kind of like Javon Hawkins, who was undrafted, but he's a very different type of prospect. He's a little shorter, more of a receiving back, displayed more of a receiving skill than most, but this isn't a Javon Hawkins video, but he's got a very different path or potential utility in the NFL. If you're looking for an actual running back who could fill in duties if he makes the team, and if he's a lot better than most of his stats seem to suggest, then his size and his style and the way he was playing in college could easily see him get more opportunities early. So that's even a greater path to having more relevance earlier, and you can make similar type of arguments for several players this deep in the draft, 3rd, 4th round in rookie drafts, really 4th round or waiver wire ad. This is what we're talking about, I think, for Mr. Doaks. You've got Larry Roundtrees being thrown around, but yeah, he's in that kind of conversation. I really like Kalen Hill, to be honest, who I've done videos on before, but people also know about Kalen Hill, is the other thing, and he is also a 7th round pick, whereas Gerrid Doaks is a 7th round pick. Literally, I think literally just the 2 people in my Discord, on my Patreon Discord. I think that's it. So the chances they're in your league and eyeing Doaks for their waiver wire ad is probably a lot lower than Kalen Hill. And honestly, Kalen Hill's a better prospect, but we're all throwing darts around this range, and Gerrid Doaks deserves consideration. So if you have an empty spot, or you just want to start stacking more running backs on your bench, because it is in general a good philosophy, Doaks deserves consideration. Doaks? Yeah, Gerrid Doaks, sorry. I don't purposely misname anyone drafted after the 3rd round. That's my rule. All right, so let's get into it a little bit more. And I'll pretend like I haven't already looked over his stats. He starts playing at 19 years old, so he's a slightly older prospect in general, and that's mostly just where his birthday happens to fall into the year, but actually there's actually some interesting statistical elements to that. Like I once read a study, and I think it's quoted by a much more famous person than me on his podcast, whose name's eluding me right now. Like birthdays born in a certain month actually has decent correlation or different signal that they're more likely to become professionals, or at least get into the pro game in hockey, specifically because of biases and when the season starts and ends and what coaches like to see and what they don't like. So it does seem ridiculous to not like Doaks just because he's born a few months that technically he's 19 years old based on the random date, semi-random date I use for dating a player in an individual year. But honestly, there is some signal to it. At 19 years old, he joins the Cincinnati Eagles. I don't know what their actual name is, so we're going to call them the Cincinnati Eagles because I don't know why, actually, but that's the name that occurred to me. He gets about 30% of the team's opportunities straight away, at least 30% of the rushing attempts, and he follows that up with his injured year, because of that hernia surgery that I read about on NFL.com. Comes back and he gets about the same role. He's running back 2 in terms of overall opportunity and points per game in both of those seasons, and then that folds over into a 3rd year when, boom, he becomes a running back 1, or at least he gets a larger share of his overall opportunities. I don't actually know off the top of my head, was he the running back 1 that last year in 2020? Yeah, he was the running back 1 for the team. Overall conference rank never really edged above 10. Before that, like he's a for the American East or wherever we're talking about, he was like the running back 11 the year before in 2019. The running back 10 before that. And remember, when you're talking about conference ranks, that's a theoretical thing I've been playing around with. I don't watch college football, so that might be exceptionally good or exceptionally bad. But I have never seen anyone getting excited about any running back at any draft capital that wasn't at least in the top two, at least in their conference points per game rank at some point. Now, having said that, in his last year in 2020, which has little bunny rabbit ears and asterisks is all over it, although Cincinnati does seem to have played a larger complement of games in 2020 than most teams that were, putting the asterisks and bunny rabbit's ears around because of, the global pandemic. But yeah, 2020 is weird. We know the defenses are more likely to be on the back foot just based on what we saw play out in the NFL. I was doing a projection stream today and something struck me as weird about Kansas City, and so I was looking at touchdowns and typical touchdown rates for teams on a year-to-year basis, and the sheer number of teams that had over 40 touchdowns last year is kind of insane. And we know that from playing fantasy. There were points galore running around everywhere, especially from lower drafted players, and it was actually a great year for zero RB, speaking of running backs. Because of that and because of the loss at of running backs at the top of the depth chart, and speculating on the nature of the college game being somewhat similar in terms of whether the offense or the defense benefit from a similar global condition, I think it's more likely that the offense was overproducing based on the conditions than anything else, and whether we're playing a full season, it's gonna got an asterisk around it when that's your best season. I'm just saying. Having said that, he was the conference running back 2 in terms of points per game that year. He was his team's lead running back in terms of overall opportunity and points per game for the first time. And he's coming into the NFL slightly elevated, but frankly, who isn't in this running back class? So it's a little hard to ding him with it too far. And we mostly profile running back from their best season. So what did he do in 2020? I actually even haven't said that. He wasn't great. He's got like a 1.48 yards per attempt, which is what I prefer to look at just to get a general sense of if a player was particularly good in a particular year or when looking at their best, especially at running back. Yards per team attempt is a little better than yards per team pass attempt just from a bird's eye view of if they were good or not. And that's not on the overall average, but we're also looking at Cincinnati. And I do not know much about Cincinnati, so we should probably unhide the team tab over here. And where does Cincinnati play? What conference? What conference did I say this was? The American East? All right, let's give it a quick glance, I guess. American East for running backs. Okay, I literally have like 4 or 5 teams listed for the American East in the entirety of my database. All right, so that's not a great look. It feels like an independence conference where it's not really a real conference, if you know what I mean. And also being the running back 2 in a 4-team conference based on, you can see why I suspected there was a large asterisk over that. The conference average is around 1.2. So technically, he was above the conference average. And it's a conference that doesn't particularly apparently generate a lot of yards per team attempt. And it's also noticeable that Cincinnati is pretty much middle on average since 2010. It's not one that overly favors the running back. On average, the team average is 1.34, so he's doing slightly better than average on a team and a conference level in that last year. That's great. But my averages that I default into my head, kind of taking in all prospects that have actually been good, that's like half. I'm pretty sure, why not? We'll look at that while we're here, because I think my other option, as you know, is to go write that article that I really don't feel like doing right now. Best year yards per team attempt. Okay, I'm in your version, not my version, so I have to create it. Oh no, more time wasted. Whoa, how terrible. Average FS. This is where if I could edit videos, it would be like doop, 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 doop. Or we put in a nice little sounder, make it look like I intended this. Yeah, let's do anyone that's had a top 12 finish. Okay. Why isn't that working? You see, now it's gone from a natural segue to, oh, I've got an Excel problem. I'm going to spend way too long figuring that out instead of, like, doing my video. And I felt like this video was going well, and now I've just completely ruined it. Oh, that's why. Okay, excuse me. I've got it way too filtered. No one's got a top 12 season, because I only had, the 2021 class highlighted, and no one's yet played in the NFL from the 2021 class. So, smart. I'm pretty sure the average is around 3. In best year, 3 yards per team attempt. Oh no, 2.1. So I'm a little low. But that's not a well-filled sample. I'm just saying 3 is good. All right. So for some extra context, that's still significantly below average for players that go on to have fantasy relevance in the NFL. But let's see if there's anyone else down that low in the 2021 class. I'm getting way too interested in this, since I'm meant to just be telling you about Doaks. But I didn't do this. I normally would. Let's see. Yeah. Okay, that's probably a pretty good example. This is a column I'm looking at right here. Best year in yards per team attempt. J.D. King from this class. Steve Scott. Christopher Brown Jr. Yeah. That's where Gerrid Doaks is living. I mean, Kenny Brooks is actually pretty interesting. But it's mostly because of his receiving skill set. But anyway, I'm getting too lost on this. Overall, his numbers compared to other running backs, even in this draft class, in his best year, kind of subpar. But he is coming from that lower level conference that apparently, we just found out, tends to have slightly lower stats for the running backs, and the team is lending no extra volume to that since they're on average in the slap bang in the middle of the conference average of 5 teams. You can see why conference adjustments really don't work most of the time, but it's interesting context. All right, so that's enough making, in-depth making fun of a 7th round pick who's had significant injury, for goodness sake, at the running back position. But there is some positive here, which was what really made me think, yeah, I should definitely actually do the video, not just that I don't want to rewrite those articles right now. That last year, he had an interesting share of the team's offense. Actually, the by-year tab is just the best one for this. Because I noticed he jumped up to like a positional opportunity share before, at the start of the video, somewhere 10 years ago when I started this, I mentioned he basically had 30% of the team's positional opportunities for 2 years. And then it jumps up to his actual best year, which is around 50%, 51% of the team's running back opportunities, which is, and by opportunities, I literally mean pure touches, tons of rushes and targets for that position, for that team. It normally denotes that they were able to co-op the role for the team at least 1 year. You're hoping, or hopefully for multiple years, but not in the case of Doaks. And it's just nice to know that a player can work his way into that running back skill set, running back role that ultimately we want, at least at college, and then hopefully we can see him do it again in the NFL. Yeah, his average is like 51%, but his best year is 56%. And I was like, where did that year come from? Because I never saw his rushing attempts or his percentage of rushing attempts jump up that high. And it's this last year because he actually got 8.5% of the team's receiving yards. And again, he played 9 games that year, and the team played, again, on average, for last year, they played a slightly larger sample of games, and it may actually have been a full season by the look of it, compared to some of the teams we've actually been profiling, which is interesting, even with defenses on the back foot. On the last foot? That'll do. He also got like 10% of the team's receiving touchdowns, which is really weird. Because if you look at it, it's not weird, but if you look at his overall stats, he has 14 receptions in his second season and 14 receptions in his last season, which is that's a nice mirroring, but it never quite crosses that 20 reception Zach Reed rule that I like to look at to say that a player does or does not have a significant receiving skill set that the NFL can therefore view and plan to use him in that role when he gets to the NFL. And I think especially because of where he's drafted, the NFL Miami probably doesn't have that in mind for him. But it is kind of nice to see some signal that, especially in that last year, he co-opted a much larger percentage of the team's overall opportunities, and it was significantly from the receiving game. It didn't work out to be a significantly higher number. In fact, it was the exact same number of receptions, 14 receptions, but that was a higher number probably because of just the amount of receptions that were being given out that year, 2020. 2020 works as an excuse for everything. It's marvelous. Yeah, he also has this interesting points per game where he hit 17 points per game in that last year, which is also the best, obviously, since that's when he was playing the running back one for the team, which is around 2 points above, again, that crappy conference's, sorry if your team's in that conference, average. Again, typically we like to see a lot higher outscoring the average in that best season, but we're talking about a 7th round pick. We might think if we can find room somewhere stuffing him on the back of our roster if someone's already drafted Kalen Hill. And Kalen Hill is in a harder situation, I think, potentially to earn opportunity in, if Doaks can even make the team. Again, asterisks all around this stuff. We're not expecting much of anything. Overall, I think that's the most interesting mark in his profile. There's some extra boost to his, despite the stats not increasing, so some people might miss it. There's this extra boost to his opportunities, and it primarily, well, it comes from the rushing game too. There's an increase in his overall rushing attempts and share of the team's rushing yards, because he comes from running back one that year, and way too old, 22 years old he would have been, or that's when the season is listed in my database there. And he's coming in at 23, which I also mentioned. Again, who in this class isn't slightly older, especially at the running back position. But yeah, that's Gerrid Doaks. I encourage you to learn more about him. I read up on him a little bit, again, on NFL.com. But looking at his stats, I ended up liking him a bit more than I thought I would. I didn't end up describing where I would draft him any better, but it means that I might actually be more willing to add him to a roster or a taxi squad if I find myself that way inclined on a particular team, which again, I should probably be more willing to do in general. But you know, you just got to stash the Seth Williams of the world. Like, it's really fun rostering Tyler Johnson, you know? Anyway, again, he's 228 pounds and just under 6 foot, so he's really built for the position, and they're going to see him as potentially having that kind of role, as long as they're not thinking of him as a fullback, and as long as the best possible outlier conditions of even that best year that he's got is possible, then again, he might find earlier opportunity than most of the wide receivers I'd draft in that range, or undraft, or waiver wire in that range. And we should always kind of be willing to take shots at running back. He's built for it. He's described mostly as a very stout running back. Again, his receiving stats might belly a little more upside in that side of things, but I'm not evaluating skill at anything in particular, just the role that he had and how that compares to past players. And that last year, yeah, there's kind of some signal there. I don't think Miami's aiming for it, but, you know, if it happens and he just starts catching passes when they put him on the field because everyone else is injured, it's not out the realm of possibility he could have a 3-down skill set in the NFL rather than being a goal line back or a 2-line grinder. But even that might confer some more fantasy value than he has right now. And to be fair, as I've said about 4 running backs in this class, he's actually built, in terms of his overall stature, like a running back, or what the NFL likes to think of as like a running back. And that's going in his favor as well. It's probably one of the reasons Miami was like, 7th round, let's go take a shot at that guy. I was looking for the one I usually use for if they have a skill down back, the percentage of yards that come from the rushing game versus the receiving game. For some reason, I can't find that quickly. Don't tell me I didn't. Don't tell me I deleted it accidentally. He also scores, relatively well on the LaDainian Tomlinson scale I just saw, but we're not going to talk about that right now. We're not. Where is it? I may have deleted it. Nah. Percentage of receiving yards from their total yards. Gerrid Doaks, on average, he's getting 14% of his yards from the receiving game, so I can do simple math in my head. That means he's getting around 86% of his yards from the rushing game, and there it is, yeah. right there. So that's okay. That normally I'd say that he's displaying some level of a 3-down skill set, but based on looking at his overall stats, no. I think I see a little more upside than most might look at or might notice, given the fact that his highest receiving attempt receptions mark is literally 14, and when you work out for his entire career based on the number of games he's played, he's getting 0.1 receptions per game. I think some people might miss that there is slight signal that there could be more positivity there. But again, I think I've said this. I should probably go write my article or something. I don't know. No, let's big screen and third act conclude this some running back profile, you know? So that's Gerrid Doaks. I think it's interesting, especially given his size. There is some slight sign that his receiving chops in college might be slightly underrated if anyone else has looked at him. As far as I know, everyone's looked at him, by the way. This guy was drafted. He's gone to Miami. As far as I know, every podcast and their son's podcast, I guess, has talked about him, but he hasn't come up in conversations that I've had a lot, apart from, like I said, a couple of patrons in the Patreon Discord, and a few DMs on Twitter for people that just like to send me DMs to give me extra work, I guess, which I appreciate. And it is noticeable that, you know, especially in this class, he's one of the few that doesn't come up a lot. Like, Kalen Hill came up a lot pre-draft, so people are going to know his name. No one was really looking at Doaks. And I think he warrants at least further investigation. Go find out what a tape grinder actually thinks about him. And as always, again, I'll say it, I'm not going to promise that I practice it very well, but we should probably be more willing to roster running backs who are probably never going to do anything over the wide receivers who are probably never going to do anything. Or the tight ends, or the quarterbacks. I should really revamp the back of my rosters in some leagues, I gotta tell you. Anyway, that's Mr. Gerrid Doaks. We wish him well. Cincinnati, he played for Cincinnati, so I guess that means he's a local to me, kinda. Kentucky? No. I can't stretch this out any longer, and I have to go and do my work. Okay. Well, I appreciate you checking it out if you did. Thanks again. The database that I'm looking through over here is linked in the description. It is free. Don't worry, you in no way help me by either watching this video or going and checking out that database and making your own copy of it. Because don't ask questions. Don't ask questions I don't want the answers to. Okay. But yeah, appreciate it. Thanks very much. Thanks for the patrons and the comments consistently poking me to actually look at things that I should probably have done anyway. It's nice to have all these mini managers running around because I am terribly unorganized. It might show, right? Anyway, thanks again. Talk to you again next time. Good luck drafting. That's how we're ending it.